I'm going to give it a few more minutes to see if we can get one more person here on the hook. So we have our 7 required.
Linda, it doesn't look like I have screen sharing permission, just so you know.
You should have it now.
Got it. Great. Thanks.
And we also just had the 7th person arrive. So great. We're off to a good start.
Okay, did you want me to get the meeting started, Linda?
Yeah, why don't we get started? And as per usual, everybody knows this meeting is being recorded.
Very good. Okay, welcome everyone to the Revere High School Building Committee meeting, number 15. Today is Thursday, July 29th, and the time is 5:34 p.m. Linda, would you like us to take the roll call to order?
Perfect, thank you. I know Mr. Mike Picardi is absent today. He had emailed that he will not be able to make the meeting, and I do not see Mayor Arrigo, so I'm going to note him as absent. I know Stacy Rizzo is absent. Susan Gravelisi.
Here.
Here. Diane Kelly.
Here.
And Carl Svensson.
Here.
And John Perella.
Here.
Jennifer Hayes.
Yes.
Rich Viscay.
Here.
Don Cermella.
Here.
And Nick Rystrom. I don't see Nick, so I'm going to note him as absent for now. Jerry Visconti did let me know that he was going to be absent.
Nick's actually logging on right now.
Oh, great. Just in the nick of time. Perfect. And Patrick Keefe. I don't see Patrick either. So I'm going to jump back to Nick Rystrom.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Maybe as we start the meeting too, there's a couple of additional names that are in this meeting. Maybe we just want to go through and just see if we can identify the new members that are in with this presentation.
We were going to ask for an opportunity to introduce our landscape architects. So there are a handful of them from Warner Larson Associates. So I'm going to ask David Warner to say hello. Many of you may know him already, and then ask his team to say who they are and what role they play, and then they will speak to some of the site plans this evening. So David,
Great.
take it away.
Thank you, Dawn. Appreciate it. Really glad to be here this evening. We have a nice presentation for you to show you the site development options at a preliminary stage. And Ty Johnson is going to be giving most of that presentation, but why don't Ty, you can introduce yourself, and then Samir.
Thanks, David. My name is Ty Johnson. I'm an associate principal at Warner Larson Landscape Architects, also the project manager in our firm for this project.
Hi, I'm Samir Boite. I'm the design director at Warner Larson. Super excited. I know today's meeting at a very highly conceptual macro level, but been very working closely with Perkins Eastman team, and I've seen the results from your outdoor visioning workshop. So look forward to, as you know, we progress further, bringing that vision to life.
I think that's it on their team, Linda. They're the three of them.
Okay, great. I see a John Smith too. I was trying to figure out if he was with Warner Larson as well.
No.
Could we see if maybe John Smith, do you want to let us know who you are or who you're with?
Is it possible it's just a community member, Linda? It is a public meeting.
Yeah, it must be. All right, perfect. I will note that. Okay, we have a couple of just some minor housekeeping items to start off with today. So we'll start off with approving meeting minutes from our last meeting, which was the July 15th meeting. I did send them out earlier today. Apologize for if anybody had issues receiving the email, but I did resend it. So I'd like to get an approval for motion for approval of the meeting minutes.
Would someone like to make that motion?
I'll make that motion. Diane Kelly.
Nick Rystrom, second.
Awesome, thank you. And we'll do a quick roll call on that. Susan Gravelisi?
Yes.
Excellent. Dr. Kelly?
I don't know if that. Sorry, yes. I don't know if that one's correct.
Carl Svensson?
Yes.
Thank you. And Dr. Perella?
Yes.
And Jennifer Hayes?
Yes.
Rich Musquet?
Yes.
Johnny Carmella?
Yes.
And Nick Rystrom?
Yes.
And sorry, all the names are just moving around on my screen. I'm trying to catch up here. Should just keep the list going. All right, and then we have Jerry Visconti and Patrick Keefe are absent. So we will vote those meeting minutes through. And the next thing on our agenda is to get a motion to propose to vote through the June invoices for left field. So that's the monthly invoice for left field and monthly invoice for the architectural team with, I believe they had one consultant invoice as well. And as well as the Sleeper Associates invoices for both May and June, as they were voted through the school committee, which is why we held off on them previously. So I can put them up on the screen if any of you didn't have a chance to review them via the email earlier today. So just to clarify, there's an invoice for left field for June services in the amount of $21,000. There is Perkins Eastman in the amount of $98,420. And then there is the Sleeper Associates invoice for $1,800 and for $2,700, which completes their contract.
Would someone like to make that motion if no one has any questions?
I'll make the motion. Carl Svensson.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Excellent. Thank you. And we will do another roll call real quick. Susan Gravellisi
Yes.
and Dr. Kelly.
Yes.
Carl Svensson,
Yes.
Dr. Perella,
Yes.
Jennifer Hayes,
Yes.
Rich Biscay,
Yes.
John Ciaramella,
Yes.
Nick Rystrom.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. That means we have what we need for housekeeping. So I will turn it over to Perkins Eastman team, who's got way more interesting and fun things to talk about than I had today.
I'm going to
Great.
jump in with two quick items, Perkins Eastman, if you don't mind. Agenda item 4 and 5 are just super quick verbal updates, if that's okay.
Yeah, take it away.
Awesome, thanks. So just quick general project and schedule update. We continue a subset of the mayor and city hall continues to meet with left field and Perkins Eastman on Mondays to talk about both potential land acquisition at Wonderland and for potential housing relocation as relates to the housing authority option. We're working our way towards getting on the agenda for the August housing authority board. That's a goal at this point. It's not scheduled, and doing sort of an initial presentation about the history of the project here, where we're at and what decisions the project has to make in the coming months. That's a presentation that we'll be drafting a little bit based on the update that you folks are going to see tonight. And we'll be working with the mayor and Superintendent Kelly to hone in the message. So that process is underway. Otherwise, just a general sort of schedule. Tonight's mostly about going through options updates. Meeting in 2 weeks will be additional options updates. We'll talk about mechanical systems at that meeting, and we'll also have a presentation for design bid build contracting versus CM at risk contracting. So that's really it for just the general project update. Agenda item number 5. We have not received the questions and comments back from MSBA yet on the preliminary design submission that was put in at the beginning of the month. When we do, that'll probably just be a standing item on the agenda until we get those questions. Hopefully we do before the next meeting, and we'll review them with the committee. Any general questions? Otherwise, we'll let Perkins Eastman and Warner Larson go into the fun stuff, the actual project update.
Hey, Bob, it looks like you're sharing your calendar and the presentation. Just a heads up.
Oh, okay.
You look busy.
Yeah, you're busy
No,
calendar.
that's not busy. That's
I
not busy.
appreciate the color coding. I do that too.
I don't want to do that because that's going to make the screen much smaller. So let's see.
I'm not sure how to tell you to fix it, but wanted you to know.
Is it because I moved this? No. Yeah.
I don't
Can
know.
you
We
still
still
see
see
the
the presentation. We still see the presentation on the left and your calendar on the right. It looks like your desktop actually, but with your calendar open.
All right. Let me see if I can enlarge this.
It may be because, do you have 2 screens going?
I do.
Yeah, I bet that's, oh, there you go. You're good.
Perfect.
Okay, and hopefully I can minimize this. I'll just kind of move it out of the way. Okay, so we'll move on to the plan options. Everyone can see the screen, I trust. So we're here today to pick up where we left off from the PDP. We know we have 3 sites and really, I'll say 4 options because the one on the Housing Authority is really you could consider it one option with an alternate for an expanded site. So, but we're here to show you those 4 or 5 options. And what's changed since the PDP is that we're working with a more realistic program now. Everything that was developed for the PDP was what we call test fits. So we had an early snapshot of the program. We kept everything apples to apples. But in this next go around, we really wanted to make sure it was a little bit more accurate because it does affect how the concepts work. A reminder from where we were with the visioning, some of the key concepts that are to be the focal point for any new or renovated plan is this represents a diagram that came out of the visioning. It shows kind of a central commons, in this case cafeteria commons, that connects all the spaces and really unites the school. We're looking to create classroom neighborhoods, and where those classroom neighborhoods meet the CAF commons, that's where we want a lot of the activity and lab spaces, both for the sake of community use, but also to put education on display and really kind of liven up the school itself. We know that with the health and wellness, the gymnasium and the community health center want to be really clustered together and located as much as they can be toward the fields and outdoor space. The commons itself really wants to be connected indoor out. And that shows up in this diagram with kind of little areas off of the CAF and commons, possibly with outdoor learning space that connects to green space outside. That would happen more than just kind of one directional. We're really trying to make sure that this school is approachable and connected to the landscape as really kind of a campus feel. We know that we want admin and a secure entry up front and in kind of our performing arts space, which will also connect to outdoor performance spaces. So this is the concept diagram, and the next slide that I'm going to show you is an iteration where we take the actual program. These are all of the spaces for the school. On the right-hand side is an enlarged first floor plan, and then you can see a second and third floor plan on the left. This is basically putting the program together to match that concept, but it's not site specific. So we start here, we try to look for patterns. You can see that we've taken the program, you can see a repeated pattern of these classroom wings where you'll see a couple of back-to-back science or tech labs. In some cases, they're the large special education rooms. And it's a repeated pattern because as much as we can, we want to make a reliable, predictable, stackable plan. It's not only cost efficient, but it's also helps students with wayfinding and creates kind of a language for the school. Within each classroom neighborhood, we're trying to make sure that we have teacher workspace so that teachers that are working in these classrooms here have immediate access and convenience really at both ends of the corridor to teacher planning space. So that's repeated pattern as well. It also allows us to spread out the administration and have what we call eyes on the street for a more secure, naturally secure school. You can see here, this is the program size of what would be the CAF Commons. It's really helping to connect the lower floor to the second floor and then further to the third floor so that we don't have orphaned or isolated wings of the school. And you can see here, here's the performing arts spaces actually drawn out with 1,000-seat auditorium in the surrounding spaces. You can see for the health and wellness, we've got community and health classrooms. I'm not sure if I can close this. No, don't want to leave the meeting. But there's the administration main office up front, but there's also the district administration that will be able to work or operate independently. And a kitchen, which serves the cafeteria, but also would have the culinary and tech spaces. And then we've got dispersed assistant principals throughout the school And again, all the tech spaces and lab spaces off of that commons. So this is just a starting point. This is where we kind of break the program into what we call patterns or a kit of parts. And then the next step is to take that and turn it into design. So I'm going to show you what some of these spaces would look like. Some of these are hypothetical or from our interview, so they're not the actual plan, or they're not what the final plan will be. And some of them are precedent images from other schools. So here you can see pretty close to what we just saw with that commons area, auditorium off to the right-hand side with good connections out to the landscape. You can see bridging and connecting to 3 floors, a lot of community and activity spaces off of this main commons. The main entry would be behind us. And here it's walking toward the kind of the health center and what would ultimately be the gymnasium. So this is just sort of a design study to help capture the character that we're hoping to infuse into the design. This is an example of where this has been done in built projects. So Banneker High School is a high school in DC. You can see the commons for this school is built around some activity areas, some kind of learning spaces that are in the main spine. Their commons really bridges 3 floors and steps its way through the school, connecting to those activity areas with all the classrooms kind of surrounding the central core. This is another one of Perkins Eastman schools, Dunbar High School. You can see here, there's a major cafeteria commons connected to the landscape. This blue box is the library media center. Here's another image of Essex Tech. In this case, the heart of the school was in kind of the spot entire school, even though there was distributed dining as part of the design. A few other examples here. We've got what was exterior space was captured as interior atrium to become the commons. And then another example from Dillon link bases. We also are looking at the classroom neighborhoods and what does that really mean? So this is a diagram classrooms with an expanded corridor. Each room has very good visibility out to this extended learning space. Teacher planning rooms are right nearby, so it's kind of like a small cluster, and there's a lot of flexibility here. This is an example from the MLK school, and where classrooms come together. This is where some of that learning, informal learning, helps to define the neighborhoods. In this, even though it's an elementary school, we thought we'd show it. This is a school that has virtually no corridor, so the corridor space really becomes flexible learning space. This is a picture of it in action, but in this case, it's a smaller learning cluster, so there's 4 classrooms that have flexibility within each, and this is really an extension or a front porch to those classrooms. And below over here, we've got an image from Essex Tech of one of those flexible learning spaces. Indoor-outdoor connections. So this is an important part. It's of what we're trying to achieve as well. Sometimes it's connecting cafeteria or performing space directly to the exterior. It's outdoor gardens. In this case, this is the Runkle School in Brookline, Mass. And this was designed to be low, no maintenance, outdoor learning gardens for a much smaller school, but you can see it's actually a relatively small courtyard, 3-story building surrounding it, and it works quite well. It's become their heart of the school. And then you can see just use of corridors and connections visually out to the site and some of these other examples that we've looked at. This is an example of, again, a rendering that was that we used just for the sake of the interview, but it had some of those qualities that have come to be important for the vision of this school, which is connecting that, in this case, the stage to the outdoor learning. And the outdoor learning is really an extension of that heart of the school. So it starts to, again, become this campus feel, very much connected indoors, out, and approachable from multiple directions. And I think Warner Larson can show us some very specific examples from their portfolio as well.
Sure. Thanks, Bob. The reason I want to, before we get into our various site plans that we have to share with you, we just wanted to pause and look at the different program elements that we might want to include in the landscape. So as we're doing our test fits and we're fitting the landscape program, obviously we have our fields, we have our building, we have vehicular circulation, parking, and so forth. But there's also very important outdoor spaces we want to make sure that we include. So the size of these, the relationship of these items, creating the campus-like feel that Bob was talking about is all very important. All these spaces serve a specific functional role, whether you're doing outdoor classroom to allow students to go outside, fitness, community gardens to engage the community like there is now, actually, and performance space and the outdoor stage is something we're looking at closely as well. And then rain gardens, those serve another functional aspect besides just adding beauty and natural habitat. You also help with the stormwater requirements that we would have to address. And so I'm going to go through Bob and I are going to go through the different design options, and you'll see that each one of these items is contained in what is shown in various locations on the site plans. And obviously parking and traffic become real concern, big concerns with any project, and we are going to address those as well, and we'll have all that shown on the site plans. But I just want to make sure that everyone's aware that these items are also important parts of the overall design. So Bob, you want to go to the next slide?
Yep, absolutely. So I can start us through some of the plans. This is the site plan that we've all looked at, option 1A. This is from the test fit. We don't have an updated site plan. And part of the reason why was as we started to develop this a little bit more, as we've been going through the process, we've learned of some significant further constraints on this site. And so we're probably looking for a little bit of guidance or thought as we take this one forward. But the existing site, as we can all see, to this option was intending to build and avoid Aracola Park. So the new construction is limited to building in the parking, building new construction so that portions of the existing building can be taken down. And then and gradually we can work our way through rebuilding the building pretty much over the existing school and over the existing parking. In this case, it's an ad reno because we would hang on to the gymnasium and possibly some of the surrounding support spaces. Gymnasium is much bigger than the MSBA would otherwise allow in new construction. So that would be the most worthwhile or advantageous space to renovate. But what we also learned as we've gone through this, aside from the geometry of the site being quite constrained and certainly surrounded tightly by residential properties, we know that out towards the fields we have the highway, which is heavily trafficked, difficult to cross, and we know that there are maybe some plans in the work for a light and pedestrian crossing down at the kind of southeast corner of the site here. And that's something that certainly we can start to work into the options as we develop them. But what we also learned along the way was, as I zoom in, was something really critical that impacted the plans. The dotted line here, which shows the very large culvert that cuts through the site, that really creates some pretty important restrictions. I'm not sure that what we're showing here with this original option is something that we would recommend pursuing, because it builds, we try to build very little over the culvert. We've got a corridor connection from one wing to the other. But to make this scheme work, we really have to build into the parking lot. And again, we're trying to avoid Aracola Park, so this one becomes a little bit tricky. As we've also developed with the program, the kit of parts that go into the school, you can see those classroom wings that have the neighborhoods. You can see somewhat in the center here, we've got the tech and art spaces. They're connecting to the existing gymnasium, and adjacent to the gymnasium, we would be rebuilding what would be a 2-story CAF Commons, and also have the auditorium located off of that. The kitchen would be serving that, and culinary arts. So you can see the parts and pieces are here, but they really aren't coming together to create that heart to the school. And part of the reason is that we're really stretching from one end of the site, the parking lot, to existing spaces, and then further forward. This front wing that's got a little curve to it is at the ground level would be central administration. It would also be the main office in some tech spaces. I think ROTC fits in here pretty nicely and is reasonably close to the gym. And the 2 stories above this curved wing would be the freshman academy. So the freshman academy would start on level 2, and it would be on the floor above the main cafeteria. And so the freshmen would have their own smaller cafeteria space, as well as the media center, which is located over the art and tech areas. So again, all the parts and pieces are here, but it doesn't hold together as strongly as the kind of concept plan that we were looking for. So that caused us to look a little bit differently at an ad reno. So this next plan is a new plan for the building committee. What it does, I'm sorry, we've got the massing first. So what you're seeing here is the existing field house and some of the support spaces that would remain, the 3-story academic wings with the tech spaces, including the media center, which is shown in yellow here, and underneath that would be more tech spaces at the first floor. The auditorium, which is a 2.5-story space. And then in the center here is the CAF Commons, which would have some program looking down onto the Commons, which would be on the first floor level. In the Freshman Academy cafeteria would be on this side, again, taking advantage of the kitchen service that could feed up to a servery, so that could have a kind of a remote dining, which is still connected. And then this has a little bit of digital scatter on it, but this is a 3-story. The top 2 floors are the Freshman Academy, and then on the floors below, as I described, was the district admin, as well as the main office and a few other program spaces. What we did, looking at how this plan really didn't hold together as good as we're trying to with the concept, we created this new plan. And I'll let Ty start and explain a little bit of the site conditions, and then I'll take you inside how this existing plan works. I'll just point out that the darker shaded area is the existing gymnasium and support spaces. So it's the same renovated space, but instead of limiting ourselves to building only on the parking lot, we're building on a portion of Aracola Park to better create that kind of heart of a school and some of the vision.
I'll just add, Bob, as I talk about this site plan and all the plans on the existing high school site. Obviously, that large culvert is something we're avoiding. You'll see that the building footprint avoids that, and we're not showing the culvert on this plan. This is a proposed plan, not really showing any existing conditions, but it is running along parallel to that long wing. You see, also the other item I just want to mention is, in terms of existing conditions, is this property is on the 100-year floodplain, as is the Wonderland site. And so there's going to be certain development requirements we would need to address. But that said, this is from a broader picture. Obviously by this approach is going to divide your site in half. Essentially, your sports is going to be split. You're going to have your fields, your baseball fields shown on the western side, and the multi-purpose synthetic turf we have on the east side. We're also showing 4 tennis courts, and I'm going to get to that a little bit more. The tennis courts are really a wild card that we've only shown on a few plans. Obviously they're very nice to have, but really need to balance that with the parking requirements. We know there's 438 spaces today, plus or minus. And so you'll see on each of these, we're going to note how many approximately we're getting from these designs. So the one advantage here is we have a longer bus and car queue. We'd still enter from School Street. You would basically, since we're sort of shifting the main entrance to the east, you end up with a longer queue, and we can split the cars off from the buses as well. So the buses would queue up, they would not block the cars. The cars would continue. There'd be a crossing from the car drop off into the main entrance. We are cutting the parking spaces. You know, the main lot is roughly, 60% of what it was, down to a little more than 200. We can offset that with another parking lot over by the 65 spaces over by the baseball field. And number one, by the way, is the administration building, which has convenient parking, but may not be in the best location in terms of being directly between the gym and the baseball field. The one advantage of this design is the outdoor flex space we're showing in number 8 and 9. So this could be outdoor classroom, outdoor learning, sort of open areas for community use. Those are pulled a little bit further away from Route 1, which is obviously a nice thing from a noise perspective. We are acknowledging the future crossing of Route 1. In this case, it's a little bit cut up, but there on the bottom right, there's an arrow showing sort of how that would connect into this property, which works well in this case, at least to get to the right side of the school. Obviously, we have this sort of division situation split, and service to the back would be a little bit challenging here. We'd probably have some kind of linear shape that we'll need to work out. Again, we don't have a survey yet, so we're still working with GIS information. So the level of precision is not, once we have the survey, we'll be able to get a lot more concise. I think, yeah, so if the tennis, in this case, if you wanted, say, parking for the synthetic turf field, and we're willing to sort of decide tennis wasn't the right choice, you could probably work some parking into that side of the site. And then you have, in that case, you'd have another parking lot over there at some place. And I think I misspoke, Route 60, not Route 1. Bob, I don't know if you want to do questions or do you want to just keep going and we can talk questions at the end. I mean, there's a lot of content we have to cover in a short time, so.
Yeah, I think we should keep moving and then we can circle back. So this is a look inside of the plan. And here you can see those academic neighborhoods. In this case, we're talking about 4 stories. Everything comes together here at the Commons. It's a little bit different than the initial concept plan, but it does gather the auditorium, has connections directly to outdoors. Both of the academic wings feed onto it. The media center would be located right above the main office and some of the tech spaces here. Kitchen is located here, and again, above that would be Freshman Academy Commons or cafeteria space, as well as media center. The gymnasium is, the existing space, and because of the pinch point, you can see the large culvert here necking down, and you can see the property line that really creates a bottleneck at this portion of the site. So to use any portion, whether it's the parking or the Ericola Park, and then connect to the existing building really forces you to squeeze the building a bit here. So I think it holds on to some of the concepts. The gymnasium in a perfect world, I think, would be more directly off of the commons. So it may mean that the next evolution of this would try to open up some space here and better connect the gymnasium. But otherwise, you can see, again, some of the patterns that we're working in. From a massing point of view, this is what 4 stories would feel like. And it's really just the academic wings that are 4 stories. We're talking about 2 stories for the majority of the rest of the building here. So that Cath Commons area would be 2 stories. It would be connecting 2 and with a visibility up to the 3rd level. But the 4th floor in this plan isn't connected to the commons. So the next option that we wanted to go through, this was, we're looking here at a test fit, and you can see looking at a 3-story building, this was an early version of the program, building completely on Agricola Park and then requiring the replication of those fields with the existing building being demolished. This moves the building a little bit closer to the traffic and a little bit of the air quality, maybe concerns that are along Route 60 here. But again, we have the ends of classroom wings, not the classrooms themselves, really facing Route 60. We do know, as Ty had mentioned, that we're within the 100-foot floodplain here. But from a phasing point of view, obviously this allows us to build the building without disrupting education or the existing school significantly. It will disrupt fields, and then it's a little cleaner for phasing. And if we take a look at the site plan, you want to walk us through this, just the highlights?
Sure, Bob. So one of the really nice things about here is the space utilization is very efficient. By fitting the building, really packing it in on that east side of the property, really allows us to maximize parking and fields and sports program to the west. So that's a good thing. We've also introduced a new bus queue that would enter from Carey Street, which is also very nice. So the buses and cars would not really need to commingle coming off School Street. You just have one long car queue. The buses would exclusively come off of Carey Street. So I mentioned that we can keep the majority of that parking where it is now. Obviously, the administration building is going to take some of that up. We'd probably look at trying to fit in some parking on the west side to accommodate for the sports, the baseball, the multi-purpose field. And again, we have this, we're showing the tennis courts. If we could look at maximizing the parking and swapping out the tennis, you'll see some of the other options. We don't have the tennis, like I mentioned. One of the downsides here is since we're really squeezing in on the east side, our outdoor landscape spaces are going to be packed in pretty tight and close to Route 60. You're also right up against the houses on the south side, which the next option is going to alleviate that issue a little bit. And then what's not labeled here is the auditorium is in the outdoor stage is on the north side, which is sort of sitting by itself, not really integrated well with the rest of the property. Convenient for parking, but that's it. I do want to mention that on this one and the previous one, we're looking at some retaining walls. Again, it's a little maybe too early to determine how tall they are and so forth, what they look like. But I mean, we're talking about retaining walls to retain the baseball field, possibly. You can actually see there's a faint gray line there, number 14, along that edge. I don't think it would be much higher than 3 or 4 feet, but just something to keep in mind.
Yep.
That's all I have for that.
So if we looked inside the plan here, we can see that we would need to massage it a little bit, probably to try to create a little bit more relief on the site. But right now, it maximizes the site. You can see 3-story for the academic wings. The central commons, we've got the gymnasium and the auditorium off of the commons, as well as tech spaces, including the culinary arts. 1 floor up would be kind of you would see from the first floor up to the 2nd floor where we would have the media center. That's also the balcony of the auditorium, potentially a raised track, probably a grand stair, and then visibility all the way up to the 3rd floor as well, where there continues to be some art and tech programs off of that main core. The one thing we noticed with this, a few things that help mitigate the mass of the building, we could build a 2-story wing on the side that's closest to the residential properties. Keep that a little bit lower. That's why we're showing these northern 2 wings as the 3-story portion of the building. The one thing we noticed though too is that although the academic wings are off of the commons, they're really kind of down a corridor. They don't feed as directly into the commons as the concept plan, but otherwise it holds true with a lot of the vision and the goals. As Ty had mentioned, because of this maximizing the site, You can see the 3-story wings here, 2-story on this side, some of the large massing of major spaces. We've kept it away from the closest homes. This is what that looks like. It's a lot of building right out close to the roadway here. And we looked at what might we do to create a little bit more relief. So one of the new variants that we're showing tonight is to take these academic wings and go to 4 stories and see what that looks like. So the site plan for this, you can see, still using up the similar area of the site, but there's a lot more relief, a lot more green space surrounding the classroom wings.
Yeah, that's all really I'd add. Otherwise, this is a very similar to the option 1C. Now we have a little more flexibility how we would handle those spaces between the wings.
And so to take a look inside, in this case, 4-story is, I guess, debatable. I think we defaulted to 3-story, but the nice thing about going to 4 is not just the relief on each side of the site, but you can see both academic wings, those neighborhoods come together and feed right into the commons area. So the commons is expanded a little bit here. It's a different shape than the concept plan, but the same pieces and parts still surround that commons, and it's open to, in this case, all 4 floors, visually connecting the school and creating that heart. In both of these options, we've separated out the district administration. Again, because of the culvert and because of the property line, it really necks down the building. Didn't seem like there was really a good way to locate the central admin without obscuring what would be the new face and entry into the school. So in this case, we can have a main entry on this side, or we could switch it to the end of the building just by flipping some of the program around. But in all cases, I think our goal is, and this starts to achieve a little bit more of that commons that's accessible out to the landscape and from multiple directions as students might approach the building or connect to outdoor learning. So this one works just a little bit better. And I think with that, the massing here, you can see 4 stories. We've hollowed out the center here. This is actually the commons, and of course there would be corridor space around the perimeter on all the floor levels. A little bit more compact. Dawn, do you want to take us through Wonderland?
Absolutely. So moving on to the second site, the Wonderland site, as everyone's aware, the option 2A, which is the large version of the site, was put forward into PSR. So this again is the test fit, the slide that everyone's seen before, but just as a reminder, some of what we were talking about doing. If you want to go forward, Bob. I think, sorry, one of the constraints, we should talk about a couple of the constraints. We've definitely talked about this at length, but just as a reminder, the lack of proximity to the center of the city and some of the amenities that the students use, whether it's fields or community relationships, is a little bit more difficult on this site. Thanks, Bob. I told you to go forward, and then I realized there are a few things I wanted to point out. We've got a major roadway, including a rotary, the VFW Parkway there. So that's kind of bookending the site with the train tracks. And we are aware that there is potential for a MBTA commuter rail station to happen there. So we would obviously look for connections to make there as we learn a little bit more about that, as well as potential for connections over to the Blue Line Wonderland stop. So, and then to the south, we've got the major parking and retail space. So this is a difficult site. We've talked about that at length, but it's worth noting that from a new construction and potential for development of a campus, this is obviously in some ways easier to do than on the existing site with the existing building and the existing school on that site. Okay, so with that, I'll ask Ty to give a quick overview of the site plan before we talk about the building itself. Sure,
I agree with Dawn. As she said, setting up a campus on here is a little bit easier to do. There's there's a lot more flexibility in how that lays out. But we are working with Route 1A and the traffic, how you would access the site. as well as optimizing solar orientation for the fields and so forth, and trying to get the parking that we want. So in this design, we're able to get that parking. We are not showing tennis courts, but we are showing an overlapping multi-purpose field off to the east, or actually the north. This whole drawing is sort of tilted, if you will, to fit on the screen better. So that's one thing you could, if tennis courts were the priority, you could have a softball field with tennis courts and not have that overlapping field. But a lot of times having that flexibility is nice with the fields. So the exit to the rotary is a one-way exit, is how we're showing it there. And all the buses and cars would queue through, with the buses being blue and the cars red. And service is coming off number 14, would come directly off the main road. What's interesting about this is, even though the main entrance is sort of toward the back, number 5, it seems to work well with the circulation and optimizing the parking. Number 15 and 9 represent the exterior stage or amphitheater, which would be a nice sort of visual from the main street. But yeah, overall, there's space here to create natural elements, to create a walking path. Obviously, we need to accommodate emergency access around the back and create some kind of buffer for the train tracks, whether it's berms, fencing, so forth. We would need to look at that as well. And the ditch, the overland ditch, just to mention, the exposed water course down the middle is something that we use that as sort of the limit. That's not something we can develop. So,
before you move on from this, Bob, I'd just like to point out that the building location is intentional in that this is the high ground. We mentioned that this site was within the 100-year floodplain, and this is the highest ground on that site. And so it's intentionally tucked to the south on the site. And Ty mentioned the main entry being to the kind of north. Yeah, I guess it's due north. That's also intentional. And we were asked internally and posed the question, hey, does it want to potentially flip and face VFW Parkway? And we can certainly study that. It was laid out in this manner as a way of enhancing the experience from the student standpoint, arriving at the school every day and really feeling like they're on campus, and that this entrance off of the main road and, before the back where the train tracks are, but that they really feel like they're on a campus, and that this entry sequence could benefit the student experience, as well as, optimize a lot of the solar orientation and everything that Bob mentioned as far as the classroom wings. So with that, would you advance the slide, please, Bob? Excellent, thank you. So this is a little rotated, as Ty mentioned, to fit the full site plan. They rotated theirs, but the main entry, just to orient you, is on the right-hand enlarged first floor plan, is at the slide north. So what's nice about this is it allows us to really create that common space that Bob described early on. This also could be a two-sided commons, and some of those examples we showed are in fact that, where you maybe, there's an opportunity that the kitchen slides and the service comes around the corner, and that gives an opportunity to have a two-sided entry if that were desired. The other thing worth noting, above that kitchen, and we mentioned that that's right off of VFW Parkway, above that is the freshman cafeteria and a media commons, as well as a media center on the third floor. So those are very architecturally pleasing spaces to look at that would face the VFW Parkway, and that would kind of bookend with the main entry, which has the art rooms on the floors above. So this is almost an identical interpretation of what Bob mentioned in the non-site specific that matches the visioning plan. The only exception being the lowest floor of the north wing. Sorry, I'm getting feedback. Is that you, Bob? Thank you. Is the main administration, some junior ROTC, the district administration, and the 2 stories above that are the freshman academy. So in order to tighten up the footprint a little bit, we tucked that underneath the 2 stories of the freshman academy, which is the difference from the one that Bob described earlier. Were you looking to say something, Bob, before we move to the massing? Looks like no. So this is just the 3D massing, and there's not a whole lot of context here. You can see the Amazon building in the distance, and there's train tracks in between, but not a lot of context, but multi-story spaces shown here with 3-story classroom bars. Moving on, we have the option 3B, and Bob mentioned earlier that this is really the version that would then, in an expansion, be a phase 2 that would take us to a larger, if that were so desired. So what we did was we located the building, and in this case, it's a test fit that we had done. So you've previously seen this slide, but located the building sort of central to the site. It is east of Adams, north of Proctor, and south of Cushman, and it kind of takes over that middle piece of the site. So if you would advance, Bob, we'll ask Ty to speak to this, but it's important to note that this is the piece that's highlighted, not the blue to the south, but the actual within the property line that we've shown of the outer limits, thank you, Bob, affects 154 units. So we were trying to minimize that number in laying out the basics of the footprint of the building, as well as some amount of parking within that space. So with that, Ty, would you walk us through the highlights of the site plan?
Sure. So the nature of the site, it's sloping from north to south. And so what we have is a bus drop off on the north, and we would do a separate a car queue on the south. We think we can get around just over 200 parking spaces, squeeze on the right side as well. There's a lot of sort of unique sort of one-way circulation going on here that would need to be studied a little bit further. The way that it would operate on a daily basis in this kind of situation. But it's an interesting building, creates some very interesting landscape spaces, some nice ones sort of nestled inside between the wings. And on the, since it's sort of a 2-sided building essentially, you have opportunities for various outdoor classrooms and so forth. Obviously, we're not showing any fields in this design. There would be no space for parking if we did within sort of what we're looking at.
Right. So I think the idea would be that if there were a desire to have more of a campus with fields, that would be an opportunity for a phase 2 scenario to enlarge the campus. Bob, if you would go forward to the plan, I'll point out what Ty was mentioning, where we have sort of a north-south 2-story entry. The main entry is at the lower level, which you see to the south. It's indicated there. Thank you, Bob. And that center commons is this is an identical replication of the rendering that Bob showed earlier that we had done for the interview. But what's nice about it, if you go to the second floor plan arrow to the north, Bob, that is the Cushman Avenue entry. So you kind of, it's 2-sided, but it's 2 levels. So that really makes a nice vertical connection through that commons. What it also does on the north side here, the kitchen, the lockers, and mechanical spaces get bermed into that hill at the lowest level, and with the 2nd-story connection at the street level of Cushman Avenue. And then the grade would drop off on those sides of the building to allow us to get to the lower level, the main entry floor plate. So this auditorium with the outdoor space that Ty mentioned in between the gymnasium, which is actually on the 2nd floor above that locker room space, and the 1st floor of the freshman academy. There's that courtyard, which again is a literal interpretation with that rendering that Bob showed from the interview. That's right. So if you were standing in that parking area looking towards the building, that's the view that you would potentially see, with across from it the outdoor learning between the western wings. Yep, to the north and south of it, exactly. So this is almost a literal interpretation of the concept that Bob put forward. Again, it's the administration on the lowest level of the south wing with the 2 stories of freshman academy above it, and then 3-story classrooms, all interconnected with the site amenities that Ty mentioned. So if you want to go to the massing quickly, Bob, you can see it here. And with that, we've put a lot of information in front of you. So we did a slide to sort of recap. Perfect, Bob. Thank you. Again, we don't have the rendered of the one that Bob mentioned with the culvert and sort of dividing that, but that's the option 1A. But these are the 6 main scenarios that we've walked you through tonight. So with that, unless there's anything Ty or Bob or anyone else that we wanted to recap with, we'd open it, open the floor for questions. And
yeah, what we're hoping to get is maybe some input if somebody is seeing something that they don't like, or there's something that they do like in these plans, we can keep refining them. We're also eager to go in completely different directions and try some new options. So this is the time. We can basically expand the range of options working off of the original 4 and come up with refinements and get closer before we make a decision on a final plan.
I was going to say that, Bob. This is really just one stab at it. And so any feedback we get and any suggestions to explore either a version of or something different, we're happy to do that. So feel free to make any suggestions or ask any questions related to it.
Hi, this is Nick Lystrom. I just had a comment and a question about the first option, the 1A. I guess 1A, 1B, 1C. The first thing is you show a large culvert, I guess to the east side of the site. I just want to point out that culvert, that large diameter pipe actually runs through the entire site. So it's something to keep in mind. Some of the location of the building actually would be on top of it in a couple of those options. The other thing too, and this is more of a question, one of the options I saw was for all of the building to be located where Aracola Park is, and it showed the wings being towards the east, towards the highway, and then having the outdoor spaces in between those wings. And so my question was, is there any option to basically take that building and flip it 180 degrees so that the outdoor space and those wings are not near the highway, but instead facing, sort of the interior of the campus?
That's definitely something we can look at. I think the site definitely kind of opens up and gives us more room to get the wings, but we can study the alternative, or kind of the inverse, flipping that around. That was Nick, right?
Yes.
Were any other thoughts on that variant that come to mind? Were we thinking the approach to the school might be different as well, or you're just suggesting flipping some of the program around?
Well, I was just thinking the outdoor space seems like it would be best away from the highway, just because of emissions from cars and noise and whatnot. So I just thought that maybe the interior of the property would be better suited for the outdoor spaces.
Yeah. All right. We'll
I just wonder what that would do in terms of approach to the building. Like I think it would be, especially with the approach to Rumney Marsh being from American Legion Highway, to have the approach to the high school also be from American Legion Highway, inverted the building, might be a real traffic issue.
Yeah, Dan and Bob, actually, I was just going to add to that. So Nick, we will study that. I think Dawn had mentioned that would be a possible thing that we may want to study. But Ty and I and David will look at the site circulation. But I echo what Dan is saying. If we flip it 180, and with the entrance being towards American Legion, the likelihood of the circulation maybe then the cars are coming from that side. So we just have to think that through.
And just as you're thinking that through, I'll suggest that we should also look at, is there any idea that uses the pathway between Romney Marsh Academy? Is there a road we should build between Romney Marsh Academy and the high school campus if it was going to stay here that would alleviate or assist in any way with that?
Okay.
And I just add that on these option 1C and the ad renos, we mentioned this during the previous phase when these came on. As you can see, these are pretty tight. We're not abandoning the idea of some sort of targeted eminent domain to help this out, but I think it's that'll come in the next few iterations of whether we suggest on the ad reno and a few of these, whether a limited amount of takings in some of these houses would really facilitate better circulation or better site access.
Hey, Nick Nordstrom, this is James. You were mentioning the culvert, and I believe, yeah, it ends here, right? Can you speak a little bit more about where it ends, or it doesn't just
Sure.
end, right? Or
No,
where
it doesn't. So
happens to
it actually wraps around. If you fall where it says large culvert, if you go to the west, it goes past along the school. It keeps going all the way. It wraps around the front of the current school, and it actually ties in to some more significant drainage right near the entrance of the existing parking lot.
Okay.
Right,
So right where you
it
see
goes through the parking lot, right, Nick? Through the
what's that?
Goes through that small visitor parking lot. In front.
Yeah, so it goes all the way through to the school street side.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it actually wraps around the front of the school, and it ties into a couple of box culverts that come from Broadway, right sort of where that number 4 baseball field is, just to the west of that.
And then what are I guess this is a question for either the structural engineer or Warner Larson, what are the rules for spanning, building over the culvert? What can we not do? And if you don't have the answer now, that's fine, but that's a question that we'd be curious to answer.
So my understanding is that, I mean, it's possible. You could do it, but it would create potential issues with maintenance. If they ever had to go in there and demolish it and it's under the school, that could be a huge problem for whatever reason. So, and then there's price, cost, and all sorts of other things like permitting and so forth. We've been advised, the civil engineer has advised to just avoid it altogether in terms of putting a foundation or anything on top of that.
This is Nick again, so I would agree with that, and I would go so far as to say that I would be against putting any building on top of a significant drainage piece of infrastructure such as this one. And some of that has to do also, you know, it has to do with the maintenance and whatnot, but it also has to do with the fact that it serves a big chunk of the city west of here.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. I think I'll speak for myself and others in that, you know, when you look at this image, you see this large piece of, you know, almost rectangle shape here, but it's cut right in the middle. But that answers why we can't use it. So thank you. I appreciate that. I'm sharing the screen right now. So if anyone has any questions on the presentation, I can just tell me what slide to go to and we can go to it and discuss.
I guess the one thing that I'd ask is if there's a way that we could do this kind of workup for including the phase 1 and the phase 2 at the Housing Authority site. I know that we had talked about that in the past, but I think it would be good to keep that visualization and that conversation ongoing.
Yep, I agree, Diane, and I think there's a few active sort of discussions that might tell us where phase two might be here, which units we'd potentially take, how many, which are federal, which aren't. But I agree, as this evolves, I'd like this to show to quantify what phase two would be. And are we going in one direction across Adams, or are we potentially suggesting we could go in two directions, towards Adams or towards Broadway?
Yeah.
And
I also think that when we get to the space where we're talking, when we have the community meeting later in August, and the second one we have planned for September, folks are going to want to be able to see that in order to weigh in on a decision.
We can do that, Diane. I take ownership for that not being done tonight, but it was more about looking for clarity on the site program to be able to understand the constraints of the area that we would use, and then what do we want to put on it? Is it what will fit, or are there priorities? So if you can share any and all of that information, anyone, as far as constraints, like which, if we go west of Adams, that's great. Is it the whole thing? I assume we're going to leave the federal units and only take some of the localized units, right? But then, is it a multi-purpose field? Is it a baseball field? I assume additional parking, because this is fairly limited. I'm looking at 235 right now-ish. So we'll want to look for additional parking as well. And then, tennis, yes or no, multi-purpose, I assume. So I didn't have enough information to have Warner Larson to set them free on that. So we can absolutely get it prepared for the community meeting, and that's a great point. And maybe we can all work together to come to an agreement about what we'll show. We didn't want to show the wrong thing and upset folks.
Understood. Thank you.
I think it ties into something that actually Ty mentioned earlier, that I think we got to chat out phase two and roads and circulation a little bit here too, because as Ty pointed out, there's some curiosities about exactly how we'd sort of loop these roads, or get them through the site or not get them through the site, et cetera. And that's obviously going to play big time into phase two as well. Right.
And even does Constitution Avenue get rerouted in order to give some buffer between the main entry space? So there's quite a bit in motion on this. So yeah, right. We're willing to put a phase two out there to show the possibilities, as long as we have some guidance as far as what we're showing. So yeah,
I think we'll pick on that a little bit on next Monday's meeting with some of the City Hall folks.
Exactly.
In terms of exactly how we flush that out and which units, and where does housing go for phase one relocation, and where would housing go for phase two relocation, and which areas are we talking about? We'll develop that a bit further.
Perfect.
And on this option, I know on the current option, this parking is not as much as we had hoped to. So maybe, we'll look in the phase two expanded side. Is the notion that even on the expanded side, we still want to match the existing count, or because this is more central, more students would be walking, and you may not need 400 and this 40 spaces?
That's a great point.
Is a question we ask as we try to balance your fields and parking.
Right, that tension.
Yep.
As Brian mentioned, we're going to talk about this on Monday and further, but in what he mentioned, we're trending towards crossing Adams. These blue are the federal units, so our inclination is to leave those alone, as we don't know how to deal with taking over federal land. But these other ones are others. These are all Revere owned.
Correct. All indication from the people we've talked to is it'll be a significantly longer and harder process to displace those federal units. So I think a few of our concepts are mostly going to float around the gray units here. And where do they go off-site, or where do they consolidate on-site?
The other thing we're thinking about as I'm looking at this, because the enlarged doesn't necessarily show where the tennis courts are, they're in green to the south there, James. Yep. There is potential to have a connection to Proctor Ave if desired. So there's also the maintenance building kind of in the southeast corner that connects over, I forget that middle street name, just north of Proctor there that ties into it. But there are, yeah, there. I think for the interview, the gray, what's shown in gray on this current plan was our parking, and there was a connection, a vehicular connection that sort of relieved some of the cars, yeah, back onto those streets. So just something to think about, and opportunities that could happen if desired. Yep. The blue doesn't show these. Just to the south of that, there's that little tooth, if you want to call it that little pocket of units that could connect to Proctor just off this, like, almost at the bottom of the screen. Yep.
I had one question. I'm not sure that we can get any direction tonight on it, but if we go back to 1A, the original ad reno option, I'll just throw it out. If maybe it's just rhetorical, but when we factor in the culvert here, and we're avoiding Ericola Park, which is what this ad reno is all about, we're really forced to build new construction on the other side of the culvert, and then connect back. It could be a light connection, but I'm wondering if this one is considered fatally flawed. We know that it also forces us to build the new construction, predominantly classrooms, kind of fairly remote to the rest of the existing building. We can continue working on refinements on this one, but we don't want to chase and pour energy into something if it's not, if it really is a dead end. So it is why we came up with the alternative ad reno, which does build on Ericola Park. So I guess what's critical here is, do we need to carry an option forward that avoids Ericola?
I'm sorry, did you say avoids Ericola or avoids that culvert?
Well, they're both compounding, but because we're avoiding Ericola Park here, it really forces the construction over that culvert line.
Yes,
Yeah.
right, that's what you're saying. All right.
And I, one of the conversations I think that we might have had, Bob, last week around, is there an opportunity, and I think this is what Nick wrote in the, oh no, that was for Wonderland, sorry. I was thinking for this site here. Is there a way to build a wing that would be bridged over the culvert to the main building? Would a bridgeway allow us to build on the other side of that, or?
Yeah, and that's what we're hinting at here. So we show one of these two classroom wings, the one that's to the north, is over the culvert line. The culvert runs in between the two, and we've got bridges. It can evolve whether those are ground floor, construction, or whether it's just up in the air, so they're truly bridges. But that's what that could be.
I would say, just as a general reminder, so MSBA rules of engagement were to bring at least one ad reno option into this phase. Obviously, at the conclusion of this phase, we're still going to have a number of valid options that we'll talk about ranking and deciding. But the committee is no longer obligated to carry ad renos any further than you want to. So if in the coming weeks, coming meetings, you do have the authority to eliminate options. I think we always are going to have a handful of options last till the end of this phase where we rank them, but you've carried the ad renos as far as you are obligated to carry them.
Good to know.
Yeah, great point.
All right, is there any action that you need the committee to take at this point on on these, or do we still just
No.
think about it?
Yeah, I mean, this is the first chance to see them all, with the actual program. So it does sort of push the size a little bit and see the impact. So this is really just informational. We definitely, if there are thoughts and ideas, like, we've got some that we've collected here on other alternatives or things that we can look at or variations. We're eager to do that. We'll always be looking for those ourselves. But that's all. We're just trying to get some more input.
Bob, did you want to try and address Nick's question in the chat, which was for Wonderland, if there was any opportunity to incorporate the drainage ditch as a water feature and then utilize the other side for additional development?
I might actually ask Warner Larson to weigh in on that. That's interesting. I
would say, I mean, additional fields, certainly. It looks like we could fit some smaller fields on that side. I mean, I don't think you'd want to put parking or more building over there, but if a crossing, it can be, it seems like a crossing seems like a reasonable, even if it's just for pedestrians or emergency vehicles. If that property is in play, then certainly we could look at that.
And I'm gonna also just throw in, Dawn mentioned it earlier, but it sounds like wheels are turning for real on planning an MBTA stopped somewhere along this Wonderland stretch. I'm going to be trying to get our design team, the high school project design team, together with whomever is planning that, because as you can tell, that could have a lot of impact, even to, I think, Nick's question of what's being built over there. Do we need to get a road in there? Do we not need to get a road? How much parking does it have, et cetera? The station is assumed to be above the tracks, and the station is assumed to provide some connection over towards and through Amazon and to this property. I know the goal of that is to provide easy connectivity to Wonderland Station, which is labeled in the bottom right here, sort of a commuter rail to Blue Line connection. So I personally think it's safe to assume that the more we learn about this train station, the more we'll have to rely on our team here to sort of evolve this plan a little bit, because I think there definitely will have to be at least pedestrian connections and pick up drop off minimally vehicular connections.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question about sort of the process between these school building committee meetings? Is there a working group that's working with you to answer your questions about preferred programmatic options of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, or it's just the feedback is just at these bi-weekly meetings?
For the committee as a whole, it's mainly at these bi-weekly meetings. I think some of the Superintendent Kelly, Mayor Arrigo, and some of their staff are involved on a much more regular basis, in that they're either involved in the Monday meetings or where we're trying to have some quick meetings and get some opinions and develop some of these things in between. So I think the core school administration and folks that are represented here, whether it's Dr. Kelly or John or Carl, are probably getting more updates than the committee as a whole. But as far as the committee,
I wasn't asking about updates. I was really asking about, are you guys getting the information you need at the time you need it, and is a structure in place to do that? So it doesn't have to be a formal structure. I'm just making sure that you weren't putting this out there for input every 2 weeks, as opposed to you're getting the input you need daily, whatever.
I get you, Joe. Yep. Yeah, I think we are. I'd always like the gears to be turning a little faster on some of these other projects, that whether it's the train station or housing relocation. That's just me. We are getting some traction on it. I think making it align with the decision-making schedule, at least in terms of housing relocation, is still the big challenge. The decision-making schedule for this committee is in the next handful of months, and I think we're gonna need to continue building momentum to have real options to consider in the next handful of months in terms of housing relocation. But we are making progress. People are available, and there's been a lot of chat on a day-to-day basis.
Okay.
I have a question. Maybe, no, thank you, appreciate it. Maybe Warner Larson can answer. I forget, why have we always stayed to this, for lack of better, the south side of the? Why have we not moved it up here, or is it just because it's a little bit larger on the Wonderland site? Why have we not pursued over here?
Only because it's the high ground.
Okay,
James.
thank you. All right.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more than. It's a little bit more than that. I mean, early on, I think we identified it as not just high ground, but a little bit nested and away from the, the garage and the crossing and some of those things.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So if there are no other questions, the only other topic we wanted to try to cover tonight is whether we're ready to try to plant a day on the calendar for a community meeting in August, and we'll meet before then. So you'll see another iteration of this, but at next week's meeting, we'll be looking to see, do we want to just go through that whole update presentation, or do we think the community at large needs some more, some other info? And I'm not sure if we just had the middle of August, Bob, pinned for, or if we did actually have a date we were shooting towards for a community meeting. I think we just had the third week or second week targeted.
I think we said that we'd try to pick a firm date today, which I think we need to do because we need to get the notices out to people. It's, we need to get some kind of an advertisement done and get it in the Revere Journal and the Advocate and blast it out as far as we can. And that's, we need the date to do that. If we get that out next week and we're aiming for the third week in August, that's only a 2-week lead time.
Yep, agreed. So looking at the week of the 16th, are there any days that we know there are other public meetings, school meetings, civic meetings that would be better or worse?
The 17th is a school committee meeting, so we should avoid that. I think the 18th or 19th would be ideal if that can work for people.
There's also a freshman orientation.
That's on the 18th, right?
18th. Right. If we're still doing that barbecue, I don't know if there's going to be changes with COVID, but if we do have that, that's on the 18th. Yes.
Is August an ideal month to have a meeting like that, or is September better when people are back from their vacations?
The plan is
we want to have one in September as well. So we want to get 2 in.
Oh, okay.
But, it might be with that and with what John just said, if we're going to do the freshman barbecue on the 18th. I don't know, maybe we do want to wait until the week after when school has already started.
Is the 19th out of the question, Thursday?
Not for me. I don't know what others.
I tend to think that's maybe the day to target for now. No, we're going to, do this again.
We don't have anything at the high school happening on the 19th. It's an open date.
So is everybody on this call required to be there?
No. In fact, it would probably be best if less than a quorum of the committee were there, just for protocol reasons. So it's probably picking knowing who's going and picking a handful of specific people would probably be the best procedure, Rich.
I do think we should make sure Rich Biscay can make it.
Yeah.
Well, I can't make it on that week. I'm on vacation.
I'm teasing you, Rich. I'm teasing you.
No, I'm happy to be there, but just that week I'm not around. So
we can check with our interpreters too to make sure they're available. And
that'd be great.
Yeah, let's plan for the 19th and take that a step or two forward and see if anything else comes up.
So we should check the mayor's schedule. I'm sure he's going to want to be present. Susan, how about are you able to do the 19th?
Yes, I can do the 19th. What time is it usually? 6, right? Correct?
I think around then, I think 6 or 7. I forget what we did last time.
I don't remember either. I think it was 6.
Okay. Great. That was all we had for tonight. We do have, I think, public comment agenda item 8. Any comments, questions?
Just for a matter for the record, there was a comment from, I believe, a community member in the chat. John Smith wrote, you could build an arch over the culvert to connect a wing to the main building, which would allow the culvert to be serviced if necessary. This would allow a floor or two above the arch to utilize.
Yep, we agree with that.
Okay.
We'll note that
any-
in the minutes as well.
Okay, thank you.
That's all. I think that's all we have.
Yeah, if there's no other business or discussions to open up, then I'd say we'll happily accept a vote to adjourn or motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
All right, Dr.
Second.
Susan, second. Okay. So we'll do a quick roll call because I think a couple have dropped off. So Susan Gravellisi,
Yes.
Dr. Kelly,
Yes.
Carl Svensson,
You can come back to him, yeah.
yeah. Dr. Perella,
Yes.
Jennifer Hayes,
Yes.
Rich Viscay,
Yes.
Don Ciaramella,
Yes.
Nick Rystrom,
Yes.
and I'll go back to Carl Svensson, if you can hear us, Carl.
I guess there he is.
It's
There,
a yes.
Carl?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Carl. I was
Sorry
going to do the t-shirt notion, otherwise you're on mute, Carl.
Sorry about that.
No worries. All right.
I just wanted to say before you adjourn, thank you. I just wanted to thank, Warner Larson and Ty for walking us through that. That was a lot of work, and I really appreciated it.
Yep, welcome.
And it was very helpful. Thank you.
Of course.
Excellent. Thank
Right,
you,
have a good
everybody.
night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.